During the Lebanon war and in the north of Israel, there were around 1 million people living over there. 60% of them were Jews and 40% of them were non-Jews. It's not the same amount that we see in Israel. In Israel, it's 20% are non-Jews and 80% are Jews. So in the north, we have more non-Jews than in the whole country. During the war, around 4,000 rockets had hit our cities in the north, and during the month of the war, causing a lot of casualties. You can see here the numbers, 42 people that were killed, and a lot of worried weld or acute stress reaction, over 5,000 people that had acute stress reaction. During that war, more than 300,000 people have evacuated the north of Israel during the war. You can see here in the slide the city that have been hit, and you can see in the beginning you have some cities that had more hits during the war, but the number of rockets had hit mostly all the cities in the north of Israel, and you can see the numbers over there and the numbers of people who live in their cities. There are several types of evacuation that is written in the literature. One is sectarian evacuation, in which people decide by themselves to evacuate. There is a mandatory evacuation that someone is telling them you must evacuate, and there is a personal decision in which they have been told that there is a danger and they can decide by themselves. And during the war that we are speaking, people were deciding to evacuate by themselves, and we heard the number of people, almost a third of the population has decided to evacuate. It's not the first time that we saw evacuation during war, and during, for example, the first Gulf War in 1999, we saw spontaneous evacuation also during the war from the Tel Aviv area. During the war that 39 missiles has hit the area, and almost 25% of the population have evacuated, and they have chosen to evacuate. 60% found places to be with relatives or friends, and all the others were in hotels. The objective of our presentation paper was to compose the differences between Jews and non-Jews in their decision to evacuate, and the second point was really to see what are the main factors that they were for deciding to evacuate by themselves. So we can see here that the method of our paper was really to do a survey. It was 1 year after the Lebanon war. We took a sample of the people who lived in the north of Israel during that war, that were more than over 18 years old. 60% we received participate, which is a very high percentage for these kinds of work. And we had 664 people in our survey. This slide, I think, is amazing. You can see the differences between Jews and non-Jews. 30% of the Jews decided to evacuate and 50% decided to stay. But on the other hand, when we look on the non-Jews, we see that almost 91% decided to stay in the north, and only 9% have evacuated during that war. So we tried to see, first of all, what are the socio-demographic of the population, and to compare it. And we saw that there is a significant difference between the two groups. The main differences were, first of all, the income. And you can see that the income of the Jews were higher than compared to the non-Jews. The area of residence, the Jews are living more in urban or large urban areas. And the last issue is the socioeconomic status, and we saw that it's higher in the Jews comparing to the non-Jews. We tried to see what is the sense of danger for the groups, and we didn't find a difference between them, although we can see what is playing the main issues for them. And we can see that for the people who didn't evacuate, comparing to the people who evacuate, we see a big differences in the numbers, and more people, of course, that evacuated felt sense of danger comparing to the people who stayed in the area. When we looked on the protection that was available for the public, we found a significant difference too. We saw that for the people, and you can see on the first part, the type of protection, and we can see that the type of protection that was available for the Jews was better comparing to the non-Jews. You can see here the differences of protection that were available for the public, and you can see that the public has to choose the best available space that is available for them. And you can see here something that we call a shelter, which is a mamad inside the building. You can see a shelter that is for all the public, or even when you are outside, you have to lie on the ground. So these are the types of protection that were available for the public. And we can see a big differences between the Jews and the non-Jews. The second issue that we can see here, that is very important, is really whether the ability to stay for a long time in the shelter was available, or it was okay for them. And we see also a big differences between the Jews and non-Jews. Among the people that evacuated, we can see here the major reason for evacuation. First of all, they didn't have physical protection. A large time that required to stay, fear of injury for their families or for themselves, and worried about the children. These were the main reasons for evacuating from the north of Israel. When we try to see the main differences, and we find, of course, significant differences between the non-Jews and the Jews, so you can see here the three main points. First of all, among the people who didn't evacuate, we can see here the main three differences. One is the good physical protection, didn't have alternative, which is the major problem was for the non-Jews. They didn't have an alternative, and of course the ability to pay for that was also a huge problem, and you can see here the significant differences between the two groups. For future, we asked the people, what are you going to do in the future? And we could see here that among the Jews, you can see even a small decrease in the numbers that people that are willing to evacuate themselves in a similar event in the future. But when we are looking on the non-Jews, we can see that it's almost tripled, and people decide that in the future they will evacuate, and it's a huge difference and a huge thing to remember for the future. So to sum up my presentation, first of all, a very important thing for the government is to understand that if you don't declare that you have to evacuate, people will decide for themselves. If you don't say anything, it doesn't mean that you didn't decide. People will decide for themselves. The second important issue is we found differences between non-Jews and Jews, and we have to remember the differences. And an expected number of non-Jews to evacuate during the next event that is going to be similar is going to triple in the future. So we have to remember it, and we have to prepare for that for the future. And I will want to finish my presentation because you all...
Indeed, Israel can be a dangerous place. If you thought you knew all about Israel, think again.
So for those of you who are deciding to evacuate today from here and to go to the beach, be careful. Thank you.